Episode 7 of Only Murders in the Building has just been released, and it's safe to say that the final moments of this episode provided some of the most clarity that the entire season has given us so far. With it looking like the killer could date all the way back to season 1 of the show, the clues were coming in thick and fast, and the suspicions around the Westies were finally confirmed and justified. With this episode being titled after another classic movie, The Valley of the Dolls, a theme which has been a massive part of the season, let's delve right into the episode and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is Only Murders in the Building Season 4 Episode 7 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The Ending Explained. The ending of this episode was one which had the three actors that were playing the podcasting trio waking everybody up and revealing the information on their murder wall, something that they'd been working on all throughout the night with the hopes of getting to the bottom of who the murderer was. They came to the realization that the killer that was most likely behind Sazz's murder was most definitely after the trio, and that the person had pretty much been after them since season 1 of the show. Something which was a massive twist and we didn't expect. If that is the case and the show has had this in mind the entire time, then I totally respect the writing, because it would mean that they would have had to have deliberately left plot holes throughout every season, subconscious plot holes for us that we'd just naturally forget about for it to all make sense several years later. The first plot hole that was mentioned was that the group originally believed that it was Sting that poisoned Winnie, when in actual fact that wasn't the case at all. So they just forgot about who was behind it and no longer thought about it because it was such a small part in a previous case. Plus, there was a note that once read, "End the podcast or I end you," and also when Jan received a note on her door, it read, "I'm watching you," in the same handwriting as what they received on the image on their phone. It was also said that the suspect was left-handed due to a smudge. These were the main clues that were given to us, but as well, one of the biggest things that we found out in this episode was that Sazz was actually investigating what was going on, and the clues that were on her desk in the first episode showed that she was getting ever closer to finding out who the killer of Dudenoff was. For example, the sick pup note that was on her desk represented Winnie being poisoned, and then once she dug a little deeper, that's probably why she ended up being killed. Because she was getting closer to finding out that this individual was after Charles, Oliver, and Mabel. I keep thinking back to that photo that was in Vince's apartment, which had the face scribbled out, and it bore a very similar resemblance to Sazz. Plus, as well as that, on the ham radio, it was said that the last person that went looking into Dudenoff ended up being killed. So the Westies are starting to look like prime suspects. They've been across the street from the East Building where Charles, Mabel, and Oliver have been solving all of these murders since the very beginning. And as we know, they'd often look out the window and watch them in envy. So if they wanted to carry out the killing, then they could well have done so. Plus, there is several of them there which would match up with the killing and then disposing of the body in a quick and efficient fashion. What else made the Westies look even more incriminating was the fact that when Howard went to the store where Dudenoff was cashing checks, despite the fact that in the previous episode we found out that he was dead, he saw in the CCTV footage that it was in fact every member from the 14th floor on the West Block that was doing it. None of the signatures matched up, and that was the reason which piqued his interest to delve deeper. This not only showed that they were lying about Dudenoff being in Portugal and choosing to run with that story, but it also confirms why Rudy and Vince looked so suspicious in the previous episode when Mabel and Charles said that Dudenoff was back in the city. They were pretty adamant that they knew that he wouldn't be because they were cashing the checks for themselves. And now, with them being the very people that are cashing in on his checks and taking his money, it showed that they knew that he wasn't around at all and that the money was there for the taking. It feels a bit too obvious to be the people in the West Block, but right now they are looking like the prime suspects because everything kind of checks out with them. Vince even had a phone where he was pretending to be Milton Dudenoff, so there could be a wider operation that he's got at play here. I've already debunked the fact that Vince isn't left-handed, so he wouldn't be the note writer, but if they're all in on it, then one of them could well be left-handed and be responsible for the note. One thing that did stick out to me in this episode was the importance of a stand-in and a duplicate of somebody, something that's been at the heart of this show. For example, within this episode, we saw that Loretta revealed that it was her stand-in that answered the phone to Oliver when he proposed to her in the previous episode. And there was also a moment where Doreen was dressed like Loretta and having the same hairstyle. Plus, let's also remember as well the fact that the actors were there in the house, which ultimately meant that there were two versions of each character. All of this is really making me go back to that as well. Stand-ins, stunt doubles, and even twins and siblings have been at the core of this show, so it's a thought that I've not forgotten about just yet, and it's the only thing that's making me drift from the Westies being the main suspects. I still feel like there's a world where Glenn could potentially be responsible in some way. My review of the episode. Personally, I thought this was just an okay episode of the show. I don't think it was the best, and I would say I preferred the creative approach of last week's installment. I feel like whilst this one was more intimate and self-contained as it was just in one house, it was relying more on the star-studded cast and the humour within it rather than the development of the case. It was only right at the end where the revelations occurred, and I don't feel like there was much drip-feeding of new information until then. This one kind of felt like it was more focused on relationship dynamics, which was interesting to see, especially with Doreen and Charles and also Oliver and Loretta, as it ultimately did conclude with Loretta proposing to Oliver and it looking like they were going to be getting married before the end of the season. In terms of the performances, I do feel this episode did have some strong ones though. Melissa Mcartney as Doreen was the perfect casting, and she was at the heart of a lot of the humour that we saw unfolding. Whether it be her holding on to an issue that Charles had when he was younger, or the relationship she was trying to develop with Oliver, it was also nice to see Meryl Streep back on our screens this week, as her performance is always top tier as Loretta. As per usual, Oliver continued to make me laugh the most throughout the episode with his reactions to certain things such as the dolls in the room and also Doreen. But I definitely did miss the chemistry between the trio, as it didn't feel like they were together that much. I know we're not at the end of the story yet, but I am starting to feel like this season has a very deep story and is way more creative in terms of its execution, with the most star-studded cast that it's ever had. However, when it comes to the engaging nature of the show, I think Season 3 is above this one at the moment. I just felt like in the previous season, with every episode, it was a bit more fun and engaging and just easier to guess who it could have been, and I felt a bit more involved in the case. Whereas with this one, the fact that Sazz has been killed, Dudenoff is dead, and the trio has somebody that's trying to kill them, there's almost just a bit too much going on, and things feel like they're getting forgotten within certain episodes. It's not taken on too much because I do think the show can handle it, and I imagine the connection at the end is going to be really smart. But right now, I'm just starting to feel less engaged at this point compared to the previous season. Despite saying that though, I am really enjoying Season 4. The risks that they're taking and especially the creative approach. It's the most gorgeous season to look at, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the connection to the movies that it has. Albeit, this one didn't have much of a connection to Valley of the Dolls, other than the fact that there was just a large amount of dolls in the house, which I guess was the Valley. At first, I originally thought that they were pulling up on the street where Halloween was set, which I thought would have been a cool touch. With the next episode being titled Lifeboat, which is named after a classic war and thriller movie from 1944, which was based on a book by John Steinbeck and directed by Alfred Hitchcock. I'm intrigued to see just how that's going to tie into the story. So, there you have it. Only Murders in the Building Season 4 Episode 7 Ending Explained. If you want to see every episode in Only Murders in the Building Season 4 broken down, then click on the card in the top corner. There's a playlist there. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.